Good morning, Bimblers. And you join me in Lancaster, just around the corner from the train station, near Lancaster Priory. I'm fighting the urge to go and have a look around, but we're not stopping round here. We're getting away from the cars and going down a national cycle route number 6. We've been down it before, to the place where we're going, but we might see some new stuff and find out some new information. So I think we should stop messing about and bimble.
Maybe it didn't work at the time, maybe it never did. A mistake that made the distance, or a trying way to live. Maybe it's the time that you grabbed at my arms and electricity flowed from my shoulders to palms in a white hot glow, leaving white cold scars left bare and unshown just to prove they were ours. Maybe it worked, maybe it never did, maybe it never was quite like how it is. Maybe it didn't work at the time, maybe it never did. A novelty improvement left lonely as it gives. Or maybe it's the time that you closed both your eyes and you pouted your lips as you waited.
We're having a brief stop off at something called Freeman's Wood, which was a name coined for the path leading to the River Lune. Prior to an Act of Parliament passed in 1864, all this marshland to the side of the River Lune would have been common land, used by the people of Lancaster to do a bit of farming. They would rent it off the council. But as of 1864, the Lancaster Corporation was allowed to sell off the marshland, and the fellow who bought it was called James Williamson. He's the fella that gave Lancaster Williamson Park. He was the one-time mayor of Lancaster and very wealthy. He invested a lot of his money in manufacturing linoleum, lino, that stuff you put down in your kitchen and your bathroom. Brand new technology back then. It was only invented in 1855. It was invented by a fella called Frederick Walton. It's actually made of linseed oil, and then they would mix in wood shavings and cork and put it on a calico backing, and then you got lino to keep your feet warm in the back kitchen. James Williamson retired and his son took over the business. He would be James Williamson Jr. He's the fella that gave Lancaster the Ashton Memorial. It's called the Ashton Memorial because he was given a peerage in 1895, Lord Ashton. The Ashton Memorial was built in memory of his wife who died, and it's actually the second largest monument to a dead wife after the Taj Mahal. It's often called the Taj Mahal of the North. Pot fact, in 1883 they built a railway called the Glasson Dock Branch right through the middle of the linoleum works. Very handy if you wanted to export out your lino to foreign climes. And luckily for us, Dr. Beeching came along in the 1960s and closed that railway and made it into a lovely cycle path called National Cycle Route number 6, which is how we're getting to Glasson Dock. Let's bimble.
A novelty improvement left lonely as it gives. Or maybe it's the time that you closed both your eyes and you pouted your lips as you waited for mine in the soft red glow of your soft cold arms. Serotonin burnt holes through my veins to my heart. Maybe it worked, maybe it never did, maybe it never was quite like how it is. Maybe it's the time that I wanted to say that my limbs won't move more than 2 feet away from your day glow side luminescent sparks. I could burst into flames from one beat from your heart. Maybe it worked, maybe it never did, maybe it never was quite like how it is. Maybe it worked, maybe it never did, maybe it never was quite like how it is. And I quite like how it is.
This disused railway line was opened in 1883. It's only a little tiddler, 5 miles long, with 2 official stops on it. That's Condor Green, where we are now, and of course Glasson Dock. Condor Green is named after the River Condor, which flows into the River Lune, just outside of Glasson. They did used to have a private halt called Ashton Hall Station, and that was just for the fella that lived at Ashton Hall. In 1883, that would have been a right posh fella, called Edward Arthur Legendre Starkey. He was a Liberal politician who was the MP for Pontefract and the MP for Clitheroe. I believe their car boot sales are second to none. In 1884, he sold Ashton Hall to Lord Ashton. That's James Williamson Jr., you know, the lino guy. He was very rich. When he died, he had £9.5 million in the bank. That was in 1930. So if we adjust for inflation, it's closer to 500 million. No wonder he got his own stop on the railway. Ashton Hall is now a golf club. I think I'm a bit too scruffy to go in there, but not too scruffy to go to Glasson Dock. Let's bimble.
Life was left alone in days that felt so long. Being on our own was irresistible. Thoughts kept to myself, shared with someone else, silently replied to most inaudible. Quiet imagination running away with me, secret conversations between you and me. Sometimes it was nice for a change, make believe this wasn't so strange. I'm telling you my secrets again. Imagine that you're still here with me.
Prior to 1779, Glasson would have just been a sleepy fishing village with a few farms. I mean, it's still pretty sleepy today. But at one point, it would have been a bustling port. The Lancaster Port Commission were finding it difficult getting the ships down into Lancaster. Did you know that Lancaster used to be a port? The 4th largest in the UK at one point. Due to the tidal nature of the River Lune, it was quite difficult to get the big ships down into Lancaster, especially at low tide. They'd have to wait for the tide to come in to be able to sail down to George's Quay. Not the case here in Glasson. It's much closer to the sea, and he needed to get your big ships filled with lino out to the world. Memorials don't pay for themselves. It should be mentioned that it wasn't only lino that they sent out from here in Glasson. It would have been heavily involved in the slave triangle. The slave trade was at its peak in the 1780s, just in time for Glasson Dock to open. It would have been an odd occurrence for slaves to come to Glasson Dock, but not unheard of. But for the most part, things would have been brought in from America, things traded for slaves, sugar and cotton. It was a chap called Thomas Morris that designed all this. He went on to design some of the docks in Liverpool and the East India docks in London. But it wasn't only access to the sea you got here in Glasson. You also got access to the canal network via the Lancaster Canal. They built a branch out here in 1826, so you could bring things in from the sea and send it down the canals inland. You'd think with all those links to the outside world, Glasson would have some kind of industry, big factories or something. But it wasn't to be. The port was rather self-contained. All the people that worked in the port worked on the boats. So it remained kind of a sleepy village, just with a bustling port at the end of it. They do actually still send out big boats here from Glasson. They send out a lot of fertiliser, you can smell it in the air. And they also send all the coal that the Isle of Man needs. Do you know the Isle of Man doesn't have a coal mine, even though it has a steam railway? We've got to go one day. But here in Glasson, they've got everything I like. Disused railways, big boats, and a canal. They've also got something else that I like, just down the canal. That's Bimble. Did you think I wasn't going to visit a church, Bimblers? Especially when you can get to it via a canal towpath. It was obvious, wasn't it? This is Christ Church in Glasson. It was built between 1839 and 1840, and it was designed by a chap that we've mentioned quite a few times on the channel. Not quite as many times as we've mentioned Edward Graham Paley, but he did eventually become his partner. It was designed by Edmund Sharp, who was born in Knutsford in Cheshire. He was a right clever clogs. He graduated from Cambridge University. Then he went off to France and Germany to study architecture. When he came back to the UK, he was articled to a fella called Thomas Rickman. Articled is posh architect speak for apprentice to. Thomas Rickman designed that big castle on the hill at Abergele, and he also designed St Mary's Church next to Birkenhead Priory. You can actually get up the spire of that, see stunning views of Liverpool. Future Bimble. Eventually Edmund Sharp struck out on his own, and he had a practice in Lancaster. He built many churches. He built that church in Runcorn at Western Point, the one in the middle of that Eddie Stobart depot that we can't get to. He also designed St Stephen's and All Martyrs Church in Bolton, which is the style he became famous for, using terracotta. They call them pot churches. That church holds a place in my heart, because it's where Fred Dibner had his funeral. But like I've said, Edmund Sharp went into practice with Edward Graham Paley, and they built many churches. We visited quite a lot of them. But eventually he left that partnership because he wanted to build some railways. He built the Green Air Railway in Lancaster. That's the railway that goes in the opposite direction to the Glasson Dock Branch, which is where we should be heading, in the opposite direction, to get home. It's freezing.